A hiker ventured deep into the forest, undeterred by the local legend of the faceless man who appeared in the rain. He dismissed the stories until he found footprints in the mud. They were fresh, leading toward his camp. But there was no one around. As night fell, he set up camp near an abandoned watchtower. The rain grew heavier, drumming against his tent. The wind carried whispers, almost blending with the storm. He told himself it was just the wind, just the sounds of nature playing tricks on him. But when his flashlight flickered and his tent zipper was found open from the outside, he realized he was not alone. A local hunter stumbled upon him in the morning, his face pale with fear. "You need to leave," the hunter said in a hushed, urgent tone. "Now." The hiker laughed it off, but as he turned the key in his car's ignition, the engine refused to start. The rain continued to fall, heavier now. The air felt thick, charged with something unseen. That night, inside his tent, the hiker saw something in the reflection of his metal flask. A figure stood behind him. No eyes, no features, just a blank, grinning face. The rain no longer fell downward. Instead, it rose toward the sky. A high-pitched static filled his ears. Then, everything went black. Weeks later, he was found alive but mute, sitting in the exact spot where his tent had been. His journal, soaked and barely legible, contained only one sentence. "He let me go, but I don't know why." A businessman checked into an old hotel during a relentless rainstorm. Every other room was booked except for room 306. The receptionist hesitated before handing over the key. "Are you sure you want this one?" she asked. He nodded, unaware of the stories that surrounded it. The room smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic. The mirror directly faced the bed, larger than necessary, its glass surface too clear, too sharp. As he prepared to sleep, something in the reflection moved, but not in the room itself. His breath caught in his throat. He turned quickly. Nothing. Just his imagination, he told himself. Testing the mirror, he waved his hand. The reflection moved with him. But when he turned his head slightly, just enough to see from the corner of his eye, he noticed something or someone standing behind him, watching him sleep. His pulse pounded as he threw the blanket over the mirror. Sleep was impossible, but somehow exhaustion took over. When he woke, the blanket was on the floor. Handprints, smudged, wet, impossible, covered the glass. At checkout, the receptionist eyed him carefully. "You're lucky," she said, almost to herself. "Most don't leave that room." A late-night cab driver slowed as he spotted a woman standing alone at a deserted intersection. The rain had drenched her completely, yet she didn't shiver. She stepped into the cab without a word, handing him a slip of paper with an address scrawled in neat handwriting. It led deep into the suburbs. As they drove, she spoke softly, but never turned to look at him. Her voice was almost melodic, a whisper just above the sound of the rain. He glanced at the rearview mirror. Her face seemed blurred, indistinct, like a photograph out of focus. As they neared the destination, the rain grew heavier, obscuring the road. He flicked the wipers faster. When he checked the mirror again, the back seat was empty. His skin crawled. He slammed the brakes. The address she gave him led to a house. Abandoned, windows shattered, door barely hanging on its hinges. With hesitation, he knocked. A frail old woman answered. She gave me this address," he stammered. The woman's eyes filled with something unreadable. "That was my daughter's address," she whispered. "She died at that intersection years ago." As he hurried back to his cab, the rain lightened, just for a moment. He dared one last look at the rear window. A faint silhouette sat in the seat, for just a moment before fading into the night. A newlywed couple moved into a countryside home, eager to restore its forgotten beauty. The locals avoided the house, speaking in hushed tones whenever they passed by. The first night, soft whispers floated through the air, weaving through the wooden walls like something alive. The whispers turned into crying, faint but unmistakable. Searching the house, they found a locked door in the basement, one that wasn't in the blueprints. After hours of struggle, the husband pried it open. A small hidden room sat undisturbed, filled with dust and decay. In the center was a child's rocking chair, positioned in front of a mirror covered in a thick sheet. As they peeled it back, something flickered in the glass. A movement, a shadow not their own. That night, the wife woke to find the mirror uncovered again. A girl stood in the reflection, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. When she looked up, her face was twisted, disfigured, lips trembling. She whispered, "Help me." They left that night. The husband returned the next day, unable to shake the feeling of unfinished business. The mirror lay shattered, shards scattered across the floor. The rocking chair, though untouched, was still swaying. A group of friends ventured into an abandoned asylum, eager to document their findings for their growing online channel. The building stood lifeless, its windows shattered, its walls whispering with stories long buried. Laughter filled the halls at first, their nervous excitement echoing in the empty corridors. One of them picked up a dusty patient logbook, flipping through pages long untouched. The final entry was dated the night before. A sudden slam. A door shut on its own, the sound ricocheting through the hallway. The air thickened. Footsteps, soft but undeniable, scraped against the floor. A breath against the back of a neck. "We should go," someone whispered. But when they turned the page of the logbook, fresh ink gleamed under the flashlight. "You shouldn't be here," one of them screamed. A reflection in the cracked window showed a figure standing directly behind them. They ran, their footsteps hammering against the old floors. As they burst outside, their camera caught one last whisper, "See you soon." Days later, one of them woke to find the logbook on their nightstand. The final entry had changed. "Welcome home." The rain had not stopped since that night in the hotel. It followed him the way a stray animal might. The businessman tried to ignore it, but the air around him felt thick, like the atmosphere had weight. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no messages. Just the dim glow of the screen reflecting his hollow expression. In the psychiatric ward, the hiker sat motionless, his fingers moving absently along the thin sheets of the hospital bed. His eyes, however, never left the window. He didn't speak, not even to the doctors who prodded him with questions. The only clue to what was on his mind were the symbols he traced on the walls when no one was looking. They were simple at first, circles, lines, scratches in the paint. But as the days passed, the symbols became more elaborate, more intentional, as though he were writing in a language no one else could understand. The cab driver hadn't spoken of what he saw in the rearview mirror. He refused to, but every time he looked into a reflective surface, she was there. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A woman, blurred at the edges, her face shifting just enough to keep him from truly seeing it. He thought he was losing his mind. The problem was, every time he looked away, the whispering started. It was only a matter of time before their paths crossed again. The businessman found himself in a library, drawn by some unseen force. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, only that he had to find it. A newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, caught his eye. Missing persons cases linked to abandoned asylum. The name on the article sent a chill down his spine. It was the name of the town he had passed through just before checking into that hotel. The rain tapped against the windows as he read further. Survivors described similar experiences. Shadows moving where there were none, reflections revealing something that wasn't there, whispers in the dead of night. It was all connected. The faceless man, the woman in the mirror, the figures in the asylum. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that had been assembling itself long before any of them arrived. At the hospital, the hiker began to speak. His voice was hoarse and used. "It's not over," he muttered to no one in particular. "It's waiting." The cab driver, desperate for answers, drove through the night, past roads he didn't recognize, his knuckles white on the wheel. He wasn't sure how he had ended up there, but he stopped the car when he saw the building looming in the distance, the asylum. The windows were dark, but something was moving inside. Something had been waiting for him. And so, as the rain fell in a slow, endless rhythm, the pieces drew closer, unaware of what awaited them behind those walls. Some stories are meant to be told. Others should stay buried in the dark. But they had already stepped over the threshold. The door had been opened, and now there was no turning back. The rain continued to pour in an unrelenting cascade, each droplet hitting the earth with a hollow, rhythmic sound, as though the very heavens themselves wept for what was to come. Lillian stood frozen, her breath shallow, heart racing as the oppressive darkness pressed in from all sides. The hollow was alive. The power that surged within her felt ancient, like the roots of the world itself pulling at her, threatening to drag her into a past she didn't fully understand. The keeper had remained silent, his ember-like eyes locked on her, unwavering as if waiting for something, or perhaps testing her. The whispers, which had once seemed distant, now seemed to echo directly within her mind, crawling beneath her skin, filling every crevice of her being. She is here. Lillian's eyes widened as a shiver of recognition coursed through her. The presence that had stirred beneath the hollow was not merely an ancient force. It was something more, something wrong. The power was unfamiliar, but it was unmistakably malignant. As though an insidious seed had been planted, its tendrils now seeking to strangle all light, all hope, and all reason. She reached for her throat, gasping as if the air itself had turned to ash. Her mind spun, images flickering, memories not her own, swirling, mixing with her thoughts, fighting for dominance. The city she had glimpsed earlier, the city of spires and light, was no longer a distant image. It was her past. It was her birthright. The people she had seen, their glowing eyes, their faces etched in pain and betrayal. They were hers, her family. But then fire and shadows. Lillian collapsed to her knees, clutching her head, as the visions became unbearable. The keeper stepped forward, his presence a calm anchor in the midst of the storm raging inside her. "Do not fight it, heir," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It has always been a part of you. The hollow has claimed you, and you have claimed it." But what she had claimed was not a kingdom. It was a curse, a darkness that was never meant to return. As the keeper's words washed over her, a new voice rose in the shadows, one more insidious and far colder. "She cannot awaken the hollow. Not yet." The ground trembled beneath them as the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. Lillian's chest tightened as if an invisible hand was pressing against her, squeezing the life out of her. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the pressure released, and she found herself gasping for breath. The keeper's eyes flickered with something like sorrow as he looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "You are not yet ready." But Lillian's gaze was fixed on the shifting shadows, the cold whispers that were growing louder. "Then what am I meant to do?" The keeper didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped to the side and extended his arm, his long, clawed fingers brushing the air. Behind him, a figure materialized, tall, hooded, draped in a robe of midnight. The shadows seemed to bow around it, as though the very darkness was in its service. The figure raised its head, revealing a face half obscured by the hood, but its eyes gleamed with a terrible ancient knowing. "The hollow remembers," the figure said, its voice chilling the very air. "And it remembers you, heir." Lillian's heart pounded in her chest as she stood, unable to tear her eyes away from the figure. There was something wrong about this presence. It was not just old, it was forgotten. It was ancient and betrayed. And as the figure stepped forward, Lillian felt the weight of her own bloodline closing in around her. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. "I am the warden," it answered, its voice like a distant echo of something long lost. "And I have been bound to this place for eons. My duty was to watch, to guard the hollow until the time of its rebirth." Lillian frowned. "The hollow rebirth?" The warden nodded slowly, its movements unervingly smooth. "Yes, you see, the hollow is not just a place. It is an entity, a living, breathing thing. And its rebirth is not as simple as you might think. There are forces at play here, forces older than you can comprehend, heir." As the warden spoke, the shadows deepened, and the whispers around them intensified. The air grew colder still, and Lillian could feel her fingers trembling in the cold. It was not just the weather that was turning. The world was shifting around her, pulling her deeper into the heart of the hollow, to places where time had no meaning, and the past bled into the present like ink-staining paper. "You are the key," the warden continued, its eyes never leaving hers. "But be careful, heir. Not all doors should be opened. Not all truths should be uncovered. There are those who will try to stop you from completing what was started all those years ago." Lillian's heart clenched. She felt it then, a presence growing closer, something dark, malevolent. The power that had once belonged to her ancestors, the very essence of the hollow, was stirring, as if waking from a long, agonizing slumber. And then, a voice, familiar and yet unfamiliar. A voice that slipped through the cracks in her mind like a whisper in the dark. "Help me." Lillian's breath caught in her throat as she felt an overwhelming sense of loss, as if something precious was being torn away. The voice was not just a memory, it was a call. And she realized, too late, that it was coming from somewhere within the hollow itself. The keeper turned to the warden, his face inscrutable. "Is it time?" The warden nodded gravely. "It has begun." And then, before Lillian could react, the air around her shimmered, and the ground beneath her feet cracked open. A deep, primal roar echoed from within the depths of the hollow, shaking the very foundations of the place. A figure emerged from the chasm, a colossal creature, a grotesque amalgamation of shadow and bone. Its eyes were like twin orbs of fire, burning with an intense, unnatural heat. The ground shook as it moved toward Lillian, its steps shaking the earth with each movement. The keeper stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You must choose, heir. Will you embrace your birthright? Will you control the power of the hollow? Or will you allow it to consume you?" Lillian's mind raced as she backed away from the beast, its presence overwhelming. This was the thing that had been waiting in the darkness. This was the force her ancestors had warned about. The creature stepped closer, and Lillian felt the weight of its gaze bearing down on her. In that moment, she knew. There was no choice. Not really. The hollow was not just a place. It was a trial, a test of her bloodline's will and strength. But this was more than she could ever have anticipated. The creature before her was not merely a guardian of the hollow. It was a test, and its answer was already set in motion. With a gasp, Lillian made her decision. She reached out her hand, calling upon the power that surged within her veins, the power of her ancestors, of the hollow itself. The world around her seemed to crumble, the very fabric of reality distorting as shadows reached for her, binding her to the hollow's will. And then, she felt it. The surge of power, the burning, searing heat of the hollow coursing through her, setting her entire body alight. The creature before her snarled in rage as it began to disintegrate, its form breaking apart like sand in a storm. Lillian closed her eyes, her heart racing. She could feel the hollow's pulse, the rhythm of its breath syncing with her own. The storm inside her was subsiding. She had won. The hollow was hers. But at what cost? The warden stood silent as the last remnants of the creature faded into the void. The keeper's gaze was unreadable, his eyes locked on Lillian, waiting for her next move. The rain outside continued to fall, steady and endless, a reminder that nothing could undo what had been done. Some stories are meant to be told. Others should stay buried in the dark. But Lillian had already stepped over the threshold, and now there was no turning back. And in the distance, the faintest whisper of a voice could be heard, far too familiar. She has returned, and the hollow was waiting. Lillian's breath hitched as the whisper curled through the darkness, wrapping around her like cold fingers. The air inside the hollow was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something stale, ancient. Shadows slithered along the walls, moving just out of sight. Their presence felt rather than seen. She had been here before, a lifetime ago. In fleeting nightmares she had tried to forget. But the hollow did not forget, and it did not forgive. The whisper came again, clearer this time, a voice she knew but could not place. Lillian. A single candle flickered to life in the distance, illuminating the stone corridor ahead. The flame barely wavered, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Against every instinct screaming at her to turn and run, Lillian stepped forward. The corridor twisted, stretching longer with each step she took. Her pulse drummed in her ears, and her fingers brushed against the damp stone wall, grounding herself in reality. The walls seemed to hum beneath her touch. It was not just a place, it was alive. Then she saw it. A door, heavy, wooden, ancient, and carved into it the symbol she had seen before, the mark of the hollow. A spiral interwoven with jagged lines, a sigil that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at it. Her stomach churned. She should leave. She should never have come back. But someone was waiting for her beyond that door. She reached out, fingers barely grazing the handle when, bang, the sound reverberated through the hollow, shaking dust from the ceiling. The candlelight flickered wildly. The door creaked open, just a fraction, just enough for her to see what lay beyond. A mirror, but not just any mirror. Her reflection stood within it, but it was not her. The figure was twisted, eyes hollow and black, lips curled in a knowing smile. And then, it moved. Lillian gasped, stumbling back as the figure in the mirror reached for her. The whisper grew into a chorus of voices, rising in pitch, a symphony of the damned. She has returned. The hollow remembers. The mirror shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. And Lillian screamed. But the scream did not leave her lips. It echoed inside her head, reverberating like 1,000 voices trapped within her skull. Her body felt weightless, suspended in the suffocating blackness. And then, a sudden, violent pull. Lillian hit the ground hard, the impact sending a shockwave of pain through her limbs. The world snapped back into focus, but it was no longer the hollow she had known. The corridor had shifted. The walls, once solid stone, now pulsed as though breathing. The floor beneath her was damp, slick with something warm and sticky. Her hands trembled as she lifted them. Red. Blood. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Then, a voice. Lillian. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor, barely illuminated by the flickering candlelight. It was tall, draped in tattered, shifting fabric that seemed to blend into the darkness. But the face, no, it was hers. Perfect, ghastly replica. The same features, the same wide, terror-stricken eyes. But the other Lillian's lips twisted into a slow, knowing grin. You shouldn't have come back, it whispered. Lillian staggered backward, her mind screaming for an escape. The other her stepped forward, its movements fluid, unnatural. The whispers rose again, the hollow itself murmuring in delight. Shadows twisted along the walls, tendrils creeping toward her feet. Then the doppelganger reached out and Lillian ran. Her feet pounded against the shifting ground, the walls stretching endlessly, leading her deeper into the maze. The whispers followed, growing into an ear-splitting crescendo. The corridor twisted, narrowing, until she was forced to squeeze through the suffocating passage. And then, silence. Lillian stumbled into a vast, circular chamber. In its center, a single object rested on a stone pedestal. A book, old, bound in leather so dark it was almost black. The symbol of the hollow was etched into its cover, pulsing with an eerie, sickly light. She knew instinctively that this book held answers. But as she reached for it, cold fingers closed around her wrist. She turned and stared into the hollow, empty eyes of herself. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was her own voice, whispering, "Now you belong to the hollow." The darkness swallowed her whole, but she did not cease to exist. She floated in an abyss, weightless, thoughtless, until something sharp cut through the void. A voice, distorted and distant. "Lillian, wake up." Her eyes snapped open. She was no longer in the cabin. Instead, she found herself standing in the middle of a vast, endless library. The walls stretched infinitely in all directions, packed with books bound in shadowy leather, their titles shifting and changing as she watched. The floor beneath her was not solid, but an undulating mist that churned and twisted as though alive. A figure moved between the shelves, her other self, the one with hollow eyes. It watched her with eerie patience, its lips curling into a knowing smile. "You understand now, don't you?" The hollow version of her whispered. "This place, it was always waiting for you. You are a part of it." Lillian shook her head, stepping back. "No, I don't belong here." "But you do," the hollow said, tilting its head. "You sought the truth. You found it. And now you are bound to it, just like the others." Lillian turned wildly, scanning the vast library. Shadows shifted between the shelves. Figures, silent and still, each holding a book in their hands, their faces hidden in the dark. Her stomach twisted. They weren't just figures. They were people trapped like her. She took a breath, fighting the panic clawing at her throat. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out. Then she saw it. The book she had tried to take before, now resting on a nearby table, its cover glowing faintly with an eerie silver light. The hollow followed her gaze and let out a low chuckle. "Go ahead," it taunted. "See what happens when you turn the page." Lillian hesitated only a moment before lunging forward, grabbing the book. The library trembled as if in protest. The shadows around her flickered violently. The other trapped souls turned, their hollow gazes fixing on her. She opened the book. A rush of wind howled through the library, tearing at the pages. A light, blinding and searing, exploded from within the book, engulfing everything. She felt herself being pulled, yanked through time and space, reality fracturing around her. And then, she was falling again. But this time, she wasn't alone. The hollow version of herself was right there beside her, whispering in her ear as they plunged into the abyss. "You can't escape, Lillian. You never could. The story isn't over."